Welcome back, everyone, to part two with Natalie Lynch from France, and she's a psychologist, vegan chef. And this part of our program, I really, really, really want to learn how to make vegan food even more enticing, more delicious than meat-based dishes, so that we feel satiated. We know we're getting lots of protein and iron and getting all the minerals and vitamins that we need. And as we said in part one, this was part of Natalie's research, was how do you add that umami, that flavor, that wonderful taste to vegan food so that people will want to eat it. And yeah, so she teaches this in her school. So I invite everyone to go and visit Natalie, or
Yes.
online, or go
Or
to
online
their,
or yeah, or whatever.
or go to
Yeah.
their guest house in the middle of France. Oh my God, wouldn't that be a treasure to do? So Natalie, take it away. How do we do this?
Okay. Well, I mean, the biggest thing people, when they come to me, they say is missing is that feeling of feeling satisfied after
Yeah.
eating. And there's lots of things
Yeah.
that make you feel satisfied, that make you feel you've enjoyed it. Okay. So the
Mm,
worst thing is, if you eat vegan food, and I've had this sometimes, you go and eat and you leave and you still feel a little bit hungry, or you just kind of feel it wasn't quite enough. And so I try and break down what it is that makes you feel satisfied and that you've enjoyed it. So you can break that
mm,
down into like the component parts. And so
mm,
there's a thing called satiety, which is that
mhm,
you said being satiated. And that's
mm.
basically the sense of feeling you've had enough to eat and you feel full.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So if
Mhm,
a lot of people in the vegan world, or it's actually non-vegans too, everyone's obsessed with protein. And I don't take the perspective of protein in terms of being this healthy thing you should eat. I'm all about food enjoyment. And protein is really key to feeling you've actually eaten something. So when you eat
ah,
protein, unlike carbohydrates, protein triggers a bit in your brain, which sort of flicks the full switch. Okay. So you can eat loads
ah,
and loads of carbohydrates and that thing never gets flipped. And so then you get to the point where you've
okay.
eaten too much, you feel a bit icky. Whereas protein takes a relatively small amount for you to then feel have that switch be flipped. So you feel you've had
Mm,
enough to eat. And so
mm,
I always say to people, when you cook, you need to think about the protein because often when you go to a restaurant and it's an omni chef doing vegan, often it's just vegetables and there is no protein. And so
mm,
you're leaving, and it's because of that why you don't feel satisfied with what you've eaten. So
mhm,
protein is one of the things to feeling satisfied. The other thing is the fats. And so fats are also really important. And I know, a lot of people perhaps want to be vegan for health reasons, therefore they want to reduce oils and fats. Actually, fats are really important as well in terms of feeling satisfied with what you've eaten. So it could be in the form of oil, or it could be something like nuts or avocado or whatever, but they
mhm.
leave a really nice feel in the mouth. So you've got to think about
Um,
what's going on when you enjoy eating. And the fats give like, oh, that's nice as you're eating it. Okay. So there's also that sort of triggers off that feeling of being satisfied. And so you need to think about that too. And a certain amount of fiber, because again, the fiber is gonna, again, I'm not coming from a health perspective, I'm coming purely from a food enjoyment perspective. And so
mhm,
the
mhm,
fibers also help to sort of make you feel fuller. So it's about incorporating some of those into what you're eating and being really, as I say, intentional about what you're doing. And so if you're cooking something and you think there's not very much protein in there, if you want to make sure you don't then feel hungry later, then just try and incorporate a bit more in there. So I think that's the biggest thing with transitioning to veganism is they're hungry all the time. And I would say, well, you just need to think a bit more about the protein that you're getting into
mhm.
there.
Yes, yes,
So those are
yes.
some elements. And then the other elements of being satisfied is, well, did the food taste good? And there's an issue. I might have mentioned earlier, like if you're used to eating like dairy products and meat products, your palate gets used to sort of the texture and the taste and
Mm,
everything else, sort of the
mm,
protein.
mhm,
And so you need to think, how am I going to get those in? And I don't really cook with meat substitutes at all. And I
mm.
also don't buy like vegan cheeses because I personally think they're all pretty disgusting. So I tend to sort of make my, probably shouldn't say that, but I do. So then I do this thing called flavor profiling. And so let's just take the cheesy taste, for instance. And so,
Mhm.
are you missing the cheese in the food you're eating? No, you're not missing the cheese. you're missing the qualities that cheese has. So it's about shifting how you're thinking about that. Okay. And so, I make this really amazing, amazing feta, and it's actually made with tofu. So it's actually not, it's quite healthy as well. But what made it taste just like feta? And so you've got to think, what were those elements that went into that gave it the essence of feta? Okay. So when
Right.
I
Yeah.
talk about flavor profiling, it's not just, oh, it tastes of cheese. You need to break that down into much smaller steps. Okay. So
Hmm.
there's various things that I put into. Cheese has a saltiness. It
Hmm.
has a bit of a tartness to it as well.
Hmm. Yep.
And it has
Yep.
an umami. And you shouldn't
Hmm.
really confuse salt and umami. Salt and umami are a bit different. So umami is
Hmm.
the taste of savouriness rather than being salty. So it's got umami in there as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you think then, so when you create a cheese flavour, you've got to think, how do I get those elements into it? And so if I'm doing like a cheese sauce or like a bechamel or something, my go-to ingredients are nutritional yeast, which you've all heard of, is definitely that, just the nutty taste. So definitely I would put nutritional yeast in there. I would
Yep.
definitely put some mustard in there because that gives it a kind of tartness into it as well. And then my other two real go-to ingredients are white miso. White miso will always give that thing a very, very cheesy taste. If you don't have it in there,
Yeah.
it's just not going to be cheesy.
Hmm.
And the umboshi paste, which is a bit of a curveball there, but easily found online. Umboshi paste is a Japanese ingredient and it's fermented plum puree. It's so good.
Oh,
If I'm doing,
that's what it is. A plum puree. I was wondering
yeah,
what that was.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
I sort of then you start to layer flavors. And when I talk about flavor profiling, I ask you to imagine, like, think of like an orchestra playing, and you have like one instrument and it sounds quite nice. And you bring another one
Yeah.
in, that's the richer sound, that's quite nice. And another instrument, suddenly you've got this huge, rich sound, which is amazing, where they all come together. And that is what flavor profiling is.
Uh,
It's bringing all those things in and layering and layering and layering until you have this
mm,
lovely, huge, bold flavor, and where it's
mm,
there. And so that's what I teach. And it's about thinking of those things. You have salt, bitter, sour, umami, and sweet as your sort of five key flavor things in your tongue. It's about thinking of those too. So we will talk about umami, but you also need to think of all those things as well. And so,
can you repeat those? Because I'm taking notes. The
okay,
what?
so on your tongue, you have
Yeah.
these different flavor receptors. So you have sour, bitter, sweet, salty, and umami.
Ah,
Okay, so you've got
okay.
those five flavor things. And so
Okay.
the one
Hmm.
thing that vegans well, you might struggle with a bit, the others you can kind of get into your cooking. And umami is often the one that's a bit harder to get in because
Yeah.
that's umami exists in very much in red meat, exists in dairy. And so it's
Hmm.
about making sure, for some dishes you really want, especially if you're getting some omnivores who are a bit skeptical around for dinner, you definitely want to try and crank up the umami. And so I
Hmm.
think about foods that have the umami, high in umami. So anything fermented is high in umami. So you might want to think about, the emboshi and the miso mentioned earlier. Soy sauce is fermented. To think about getting those in. Your kimchi, your sauerkraut. Just try and think about getting those kind of things into your cooking. Other things high in umami, like tomato puree, is really high in umami. So when you're cooking with
Hmm.
tomato puree, always put it in right at the start for cooking, in with the onions, really reduce it down to a nice sort of deeper red. That's going to really bring out the umami. If it
Yeah.
starts to
Yeah.
stick to the pan, that's fantastic because that's creating flavor. Then you can deglaze it. So red, so you've got that. You've got one of the other big powerhouses of umami is mushrooms. Mushrooms are really, really great for umami, especially if you can get some dried mushrooms. And the two big ones being shiitake mushrooms,
Hmm.
and we call them sap here. I think everyone else in the world calls them porcini. If you can get dried porcini
Yeah.
and dried shiitakes, those are so high. And sometimes what I do is I blitz them into the grinder into a powder. So you've got a mushroom powder there, and you can just add that into sauces to really crank up the umami. Or you can soak them. I soak porcini mushrooms in liquid. And you get beautiful, rich brown liquid, and you can use that as a vegetable stock as well to get a really kind of, if
Oh,
you're creating more of a kind of like a bourguignon or a stew, that gives you a
right.
really, really rich sort of basis there. And
Wow.
so obviously then the umami is quite key. But I would say also think about your other flavors there, your sweet and your salty and your bitter and your sour, because you do need to think
Yeah.
about those as well. So it's about
Hmm.
knowing what's going on as you're tasting. So I always say taste as you're going along. If something tastes a little bit, too bitter, you might want to add, something to that to offset that. And if something's too sweet, add some little bit of salt. So I always say, like pudding desserts, chocolate dessert, add salt to it. Salt really, really enhances the chocolate. and it's an amazing thing. If you're making
Yeah.
bolognese, add some sweetener, add some, agave or some sugar to your bolognese because it brings out the taste of the tomatoes. Add some lemon juice, add some bit of bitter lemon juice to balance the flavors as well to that. So always be thinking of how you can start to balance things. And I think the thing with vegan cooking, which I often say to omni chefs, which I find contentious, is that if you can really truly learn to master vegan cooking and flavor, it's going to make you such a better cook because you really have to, because you can't rely on the meat and the dairy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn how to get that flavor in different ways. And if you can master that, I just think it makes you
Mm.
such a great cook. It really does. And so, but they're so
Yeah.
easily learned, all those things.
Yeah. Wow. I've taken a lot of notes and I'm going to listen to this recording again. But let's move into well, before I want to ask you about different proteins that we can add because people are always worried about that. And but yesterday I made a miso soup.
Mm-hmm.
Taking the uh, baby bok choy and mushrooms and miso and what else I added some garlic and so on. And it is, and then to the soup, I air fried some marinated tofu, and then of course the ramen noodles. Well, it's a feast. It's
Yeah.
so simple, to keep our food simple. I think is so I'm obsessed with this miso soup now. My husband won't eat it, but I love
Me
it.
too. I cook
Yeah,
lots of miso soups. I'm obsessed too. Good obsession.
yeah, yeah. So let's move the topic now to proteins. What proteins can people transitioning to a vegan diet use? I know, there's all the processed burgers out there. My
Mm.
husband eats them. I don't touch them anymore, but
They
he
have
loves
their
them.
place. They have their place. I think for people who is transitioning as well, I think it can be quite difficult. So I think it's quite good to have things they're familiar with. So
Yeah,
to have some kind of
yeah,
like vegan style chicken or burgers, I think it's a
yeah,
great thing.
yeah.
Every now and again I might go out and have one of those dirty burgers, but I generally tend to they are dirty, but I tend to make my own. But I think protein, I think people can become overly obsessed with it. Protein isn't everything, even vegetables, anything, it's in everything. And even if you don't add
Yeah.
any more, I think most people do get enough protein. I would say,
Hmm.
however, obviously, I was talking about sort of that sense of feeling full. So, with your ramen, if you wanted to get more protein into that, you could put some peanut butter in there, which is really lovely in ramen. And,
Ooh, I'm gonna do that.
In Japanese cooking, they often put like sesame paste, similar to tahini in as well. So that would also give it that would also up your protein consumption. And sometimes add a little bit of soy milk to my ramen, which has got
Hmm.
protein in. But if you want even more protein than that with your ramen, you can blitz some silken tofu in so it's quite smooth and add that as a cream into it as well. So silken
Hmm.
tofu is really great as like add it to ramen as a pasta sauce even just to increase the protein. But the other obvious things with protein, you've got your beans and pulses. The highest
Yeah,
ones, I think, like black beans and soybeans are like the highest you can get in protein. So you've got those.
yeah.
And then you've got things like tempeh and things like
Hmm.
tofu, again, really, really high.
Hmm.
I make my own seitan. So seitan is really, really, that's probably one of the highest things is to have seitan. I
Yeah.
know for people who perhaps can't eat gluten, obviously that's a no-go area, but if you can, then that's a great source of protein as well. And so, if I want to do a very protein rich sauce, then, as I said to you earlier, I might do a sauce with silken tofu as the base, but also cashew nuts as well. Soak some cashew nuts,
Yeah.
blitz them into a cream, and perhaps add some flavorings to that as well to get the protein up. And one thing I've started doing recently is actually making gnocchi with tofu, where you blitz the tofu and you add a bit of regular flour, rice flour. If you can't gluten, you roll that and you cook that into gnocchi as like a tofu sauce. So you've got something ridiculously high in protein then. Instead of mashed potato, you can swap that out with mashed butter beans. Are just absolutely gorgeous. So you could have like your mashed butter beans instead of mashed potato. Then you've got something much higher in protein as well.
Mm.
So, there's no issue getting lots of protein into your vegan cooking. You just
Mm.
have to be a bit more
Okay.
creative about it, really. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Well, my miso soup is changing from this moment onwards. I'm going to throw in all this stuff that oh my God. Wow, what a joy to have you come and teach us. And
you're
so
very
again,
welcome.
encourage all of our viewers to go and visit Natalie in France at her guest house, take her cooking course, and also online. Yeah. Raj, any final thoughts from you, dear one? Comments or questions from you?
I love soups, vegan
Oh,
soups.
you love soups, yeah.
Yeah, I love soup.
Yeah.
Soup, because I love light diets because when you eat light food, so you feel more energetic and you are more productive and you feel more active and smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I come from a Ukrainian background, so I eat a lot. I need to reduce my intake, but like last night I cooked up some pierogies, right? Oh, they're so
I love
delicious.
pierogies.
Sweet potato on the inside, and and we had some other dishes with it, but I really need to cut back on my volume. My poor body doesn't know what to do with all of it, but I'm not overweight or anything, so I'm doing okay. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do love soups too. Natalie, do you have a cookbook yet? A recipe book?
I don't, but what I'm about to be launching is I'm going to be launching an online cooking club. And so it's all the stuff that I've mentioned. So it's going to be monthly release recipes. It's going to be
Okay.
big community-based thing. And so if people want my recipes, obviously they can join that cooking club there.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
one day I'll get around to writing a book, but yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Okay,
sure
well,
when.
count me in. Count me in. I'm going to be there at your cooking club, because really, I mean, this is a very serious thing we're talking about here to improve people's health, improve the health of our planet, stop animal suffering. The vegan diet is the way to go, because it's more compassionate, more kind, as we said, more healthy, and so to learn how to make it delicious is key. Is really key. And then I think more and more people are going to sign up. So please, folks watching, go and visit Natalie. Check her out on her website. Above this video, you will see, or below the video, you will see all of her contact information. At her website is lechevalblanc.net. So it's the white horse.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a story behind that as well, but we'll catch you another time for that one.
Okay, there was a story, but yeah, okay.
Yeah,
bye.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you again
You're very
soon.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.